The air in the 64th floor penthouse of the Obsidian Tower didn't just feel expensive, it felt lethal. Outside, Manhattan was a blurred canvas of slate gray rain and neon flickers, but inside, the silence was absolute. It was the kind of silence that preceded a lightning strike, heavy, ionized, and suffocating. Maya Vance sat on the cold, black marble floor of the private gallery. Her hands, usually as steady as a surgeon's, were trembling. Before her lay the shattered remains of a 15th-century Joseon dynasty vase. To a layman, it was a pile of porcelain shards. To the man who owned this room, it was a $4 million casualty of a disagreement. To Maya, it was her only way out of a grave. She didn't hear him enter. He didn't use the door like a normal man. He simply manifested from the shadows of the hallway. The first sign of his presence was the sound. Clack, clack, clack. The rhythmic, predatory strike of a gold-tipped obsidian cane against the floor. Maya kept her head down. Her dark hair fell forward in a strategic curtain, shielding the left side of her face. She focused on a singular shard of porcelain, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The work, a voice vibrated through the room. It was deep, melodic, and carried the chill of an Arctic wind. Does it begin, or are you merely mourning the dead, Miss Vance? Maya didn't look up. It begins, Mr. Kong. Porcelain has a memory. I'm just listening to what it wants to tell me before I fix it. A philosopher, Kong Daehyun mused. The clack of his cane stopped inches from her knees. I was told I was hiring a restorer, not a poet. In my world, they are the same thing, she whispered. Then, the movement happened. It was too fast for her to protest. The cold, polished gold handle of the cane hooked under her chin. With a slow, irresistible pressure, Daehyun forced her head up. Maya tried to resist, but she was trapped. Her hair slid back, revealing the truth she had tried so hard to bury. Under the harsh, recessed gallery lights, the injury was undeniable. A deep, purpling bruise bloomed across her jawline, stretching toward her ear. Her bottom lip was swollen, a faint silver line of a healing scar cutting through the center. Daehyun's eyes weren't brown or black. They were the color of flint. He didn't gasp. He didn't ask if she was okay. He simply stared at the mark with the intensity of a man looking at a crack in his own foundation. The two guards standing at the obsidian doors, men who had seen wars and executions, visibly stiffened. They looked at each other, a silent communication of dread passing between them. They knew that look on Daehyun's face. It was the look he wore before he erased a name from the earth. Daehyun leaned in, his face inches from hers. Maya could smell him now. Sandalwood, expensive tailoring, and the faint, ozone-like scent of danger. Who? He whispered, the word barely a breath. Touched what belongs to me. I don't belong to you, Maya rasped, her voice trembling. I'm just a contractor. Daehyun didn't blink. He lowered the cane, but he didn't move away. He reached out with a gloved hand, his thumb hovering just millimeters from the bruised skin. Everything in this room belongs to me, Maya. The vase, the air, the silence. He paused, his gaze dropping to the defensive marks on her wrists. And especially the woman who has the audacity to bleed in my house. Then, the room went silent. A silence so profound it felt like the world had stopped spinning. To understand how Maya Vance ended up on the floor of a mafia boss's penthouse, one had to understand the weight of a legacy she never asked for. Maya was a woman of fine lines and delicate textures. She had spent her 20s in the quiet alcoves of the Met and the Louvre, learning the ancient art of Kintsugi, the Japanese method of repairing broken pottery with gold. She believed that breaks made a thing stronger, more beautiful. But her brother, Marcus, believed in a different kind of break. Marcus was a man of sure things and can't lose bets. 2 weeks ago, Marcus had bet money he didn't have with men who didn't take apologies. When the debt came due, and Marcus disappeared into the ether of the city, the predators came for the only thing he had left, his sister. The bruise on Maya's jaw was a down payment. They had broken into her small apartment at 3 a.m., tossing her books and smashing her tools. Tell Marcus the interest is a pint of blood a week, they had sneered before leaving her on the floor. She had taken the contract with Kong Daehyun out of sheer survival. The pay for restoring the Joseon vase was enough to clear Marcus's debt 10 times over. She thought she could hide in the shadows of the obsidian tower, fix the porcelain, and vanish. She was wrong. For the first week, Dae-hyun was a ghost. Maya worked 10-hour shifts, meticulously cleaning each shard of the vase. She used a mixture of lacquer and powdered 24-karat gold. She worked in a corner of the gallery, surrounded by priceless artifacts that felt like guards. But Dae-hyun was watching, not through the security cameras, but from the darkness of the mezzanine. He watched the way she tucked her hair behind her ear. He watched the way she hummed low, mournful soul songs when she thought she was alone. He watched the way she flinched whenever a door opened too loudly. On the third day, a tray appeared on her work table. It wasn't the cafeteria food the guards ate. It was a steaming bowl of samjitang, ginseng chicken soup, and a small, unlabeled glass jar of green ointment. The master says the smell of glue is bad for the appetite, the maid had whispered before scurrying away. Maya had opened the jar. The ointment smelled of herbs and ancient forests. When she applied it to her jaw, the throbbing heat that had kept her awake for 3 nights finally began to cool. She looked up at the mezzanine. She saw nothing but the glint of a gold-tipped cane disappearing into the dark. The 8th day began with a change in the barometer. The rain had turned into a sleet that hammered against the windows like gravel. Maya was finishing the base of the vase, her brush stroking the gold lacquer with surgical precision. The elevator chimed. This was unusual. No one entered the private gallery without Dae-hyun's express permission. The guards at the door, 2 young men named Min and Jun, stepped forward, their hands moving toward their holsters. 2 men stepped out of the elevator. They weren't dressed in the sleek, dark suits of the Kong organization. They wore leather jackets that smelled of cheap tobacco and damp street air. These were the men from the apartment. The debt collectors. Well, the taller one, a man with a jagged scar across his nose named Silas, grinned. Look at this. Little Maya found herself a gold mine. No wonder Marcus isn't answering his phone. Maya stood up, her heart leaping into her throat. She gripped her palette knife, a pathetic weapon, but it was all she had. How did you get in here? The service entrance has a very low threshold for bribes, sweetheart, Silas said, stepping onto the black marble. He looked around at the millions of dollars of art with greedy eyes. Marcus owes us 50 grand. But looking at this place, I think the price just went up to 100. Leave, Maya said, her voice shaking. You don't know where you are. You don't know who owns this building. I don't care if the Pope owns it, Silas sneered, reaching out to grab Maya's arm. You're coming with us. We're going to call Marcus and let him hear you scream. Maybe then he'll find his wallet. Maya backed away, her heel catching on the edge of her work table. The Josian vase, the $4 million masterpiece, wobbled. Stop, she cried out. From the corner of the room, a sound echoed. Clink. It was the sound of a porcelain teacup meeting a saucer. It was a small, delicate sound, but it cut through the thug's bravado like a razor. Dae-hyun was sitting in a high-backed leather chair that Maya had thought was empty. He was shrouded in the dim light of the far corner, a book resting on his lap. He didn't stand up. He didn't reach for a weapon. He simply looked at Silas. You are tracked mud onto my floor, Dae-hyun said. His voice was conversational, almost bored. And you have interrupted a masterpiece in progress. These are 2 things I find intolerable. Silas pulled a snub-nosed revolver from his jacket. I don't know who you are, old man, but stay in your chair if you want to keep breathing. This is a debt collection. Dae-hyun finally looked up. The light hit his eyes, and Silas froze. There was a vacancy in Dae-hyun's gaze, a complete absence of fear or hesitation. It was the look of a man who had already decided how Silas would die. Maya, Dae-hyun said, his eyes never leaving Silas. Go to the kitchen. The oolong tea is on the 2nd shelf. It needs exactly 3 minutes to steep. But, Maya started. 3 minutes, Maya, Dae-hyun repeated. Do not come out until the tea is ready. The smell of garbage is about to become overwhelming. Maya looked at the thugs, then at Dae-hyun. She saw the 2 guards at the door step back, crossing their arms. They weren't going to help the thugs. They were moving out of the splash zone. Maya turned and ran toward the kitchen. As the heavy oak doors swung shut behind her, she heard Silas start to say, Hey, I'm talking to you. Then, the room went silent. In the kitchen, Maya's hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the kettle. She watched the digital timer on the stove. 2:45. She heard a muffled thud. Not a gunshot. A thud, like a heavy sack of grain being dropped from a great height. 2:10, there was a sound of glass breaking. A sharp, crystalline shatter. 1:30, a low, wet sound. A groan that was cut off abruptly. 0:45, the silence returned. It was deeper now. The air through the vents seemed to chill. Midnight, the timer beeped. Maya stood there for a full minute, her hand on the handle of the teapot. She was terrified of what she would find on the other side of that door. She was a woman who fixed things. She didn't know how to live in a world where things were permanently broken. She pushed the door open. The gallery was pristine. The thugs were gone. There was no blood on the marble. No signs of a struggle. The only difference was that the window she had been working near was slightly cracked open, letting in the scent of the rain. Dae-hyun was standing by her work table, looking at the Josian vase. He held his gold-tipped cane in one hand and a small white cloth in the other. He was wiping a single, microscopic red droplet from the edge of the table. "The tea?" he asked, not looking at her. Maya walked forward, her legs feeling like lead. She set the tray down. "Where are they?" "They had a prior engagement," Dae-hyun said. He turned to her. He reached out and took the teapot from her, pouring a perfect stream into his cup. "Your brother's debt has been purchased, Maya." Maya blinked. "Purchased? By who?" "By me." Dae-hyun took a sip of the tea. "Which means you no longer owe those animals anything. You owe me. I can't pay you back $100,000, she whispered. "I don't want your money, Maya Vance." He stepped closer, the cane clicking rhythmically. "I want your hands. I want your eyes. And I want your loyalty. From this moment on, you do not restore art for the city. You restore it for me. You are my curator. You move into the penthouse. You eat at my table. And in return, the world will never lay a hand on you again." Maya looked at the bruise in the reflection of the black marble. For the first time, she didn't feel like a victim. She felt like an asset. "And if I say no?" Dae-hyun leaned in, his flint-colored eyes softening just a fraction. "Then you walk out that door, and I let the world find you again. But we both know you've already fallen in love with the silence of this room." He was right. Maya reached out and touched the gold vein she had placed in the vase. "I'll stay," she said. The next 6 months were a blur of quiet luxury and dark education. Maya didn't just fix vases. She became the architect of Dae-hyun's public image. She curated his galleries, organized his galas, and learned the intricate dance of the New York elite. But she also learned the business. She learned that Dae-hyun wasn't just a boss. He was a stabilizer. He kept the chaotic street gangs in check. He was the shadow that allowed the light to exist. She also learned about the man. She learned that he slept only 4 hours a night. She learned that he played the cello when he was angry, the deep, mournful notes vibrating through the floorboards of the penthouse. And she learned that he never touched her without permission. The physical attraction between them was a wire stretched to the breaking point. It was in the way his hand lingered on the small of her back at a fundraiser. It was in the way she adjusted his tie before a meeting, her fingers brushing the skin of his throat. The turning point came during the winter solstice gala. Maya was wearing a dress the color of midnight, silk that clung to her curves and left her shoulders bare. She was standing at the bar when a man approached her. It was Lee Jin-ho, a rival of Dae-hyun's from the Brooklyn docks. He was a man of loud suits and louder threats. "You're the one," Jin-ho whispered, leaning into her space. "The little bird in the gold cage. Dae-hyun thinks he can hide his heart in a pretty restorer, but everyone knows a bird is easy to pluck." Maya didn't flinch. She didn't look for the guards. She turned to Jin-ho, her eyes cold and clinical. "You're Lee Jin-ho," she said. "You've lost 3 shipments in the last month because you use unencrypted radio frequencies. You're currently $6 million in debt to the triads, and your own brother is planning to replace you by February." Jin-ho's face went pale. "How do you?" "I don't just fix vases, Mr. Lee. I listen to the cracks in the world." She leaned in, her voice a lethal whisper. "And right now, you are sounding very brittle. If I were you, I would leave before I tell Mr. Kong that you're boring me." Jin-ho backed away, stumbling over his own feet. From across the room, Dae-hyun was watching. He didn't move. He didn't intervene. He simply raised his glass of scotch in a silent toast. That night, the penthouse felt different. The tension that had been building for months finally snapped. Maya was in the gallery, looking at the Josian vase. It was her masterpiece. The gold veins made the porcelain look like it was held together by lightning. Dae-hyun entered. "No cane tonight." He walked with the effortless grace of a king returning to his throne. Jinho left the gala in a panic, Daehyun said, standing behind her. What did you say to him? I told him the truth, Maya said, turning around. That he was broken beyond repair. Daehyun reached out, his hand cupping her jaw. Not with a cane, but with his bare palm. His skin was warm. You've changed, Maya Vance. You told me that breaks make a thing stronger, she whispered. You broke my world, Daehyun. And then you filled the cracks with gold. Daehyun leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. I didn't fix you. I just gave you a place where you didn't have to hide. He kissed her then. It wasn't the kiss of a hero. It was the kiss of a man who had been in the dark for too long and had finally found a light he couldn't put out. It was desperate, fierce, and certain. Maya pulled him closer, her hands winding into his hair. She knew the world they lived in was dangerous. She knew there would be more thugs, more rivals, and more blood. But as she looked at the Josian vase, stronger now than it had ever been, she realized she wasn't afraid of the breaks anymore. Stay with me, Daehyun rasped against her lips. Not as a contractor, not as a curator, but as the woman who owns the ghost of soul. Maya smiled, a radiant, lethal thing. I thought you said you owned everything in this room, Daehyun. I lied, he whispered. I'm just the artifact. You're the gold. 3 years later, the Vance Kong Center for the Arts opened in downtown Manhattan. It was a glass and steel marvel, a place where struggling artists and social workers could find refuge. It was funded by legitimate investments that Maya had personally vetted. Maya stood on the balcony of the center, watching the city below. She wore a simple gold band on her finger. Behind her, she heard the familiar clack of a cane. Daehyun stepped into the light. He looked older, perhaps, but the flint in his eyes had been replaced by something resembling peace. The gala is starting, he said. In a minute, Maya replied. She looked at him, then at the city. Do you ever regret it? Buying my debt. Daehyun walked to her, pulling her into his side. He looked down at the street where, years ago, Silas and his men had vanished into the rain. It was the best investment I ever made, he said. The vase was $4 million. But the woman? She was priceless. They walked into the gala together, two people held together by gold, moving through a world that finally knew better than to try and break them again.